Hello, listener. For the launch of We Have Issues, I asked a handful of people on the internet that I really admire, and who made the mistake of letting me talk to them for 5 seconds, to answer a few questions for some tiny promotional mini-episodes. Minisodes! The format I suggested was eccentric and well-meaning, designed to promote not just the show, but also comics. The plan was for little, tiny episodes. I don't know if I'm making clear quite how small these things were meant to be. Microsodes, really. Barely even a thing. I wasn't quite prepared for the gin-fueled enthusiasm of Ellen and Andy. What follows is an excerpt from their recording, which I'm sure you'll enjoy. However, their complete chat was too good to just throw away, so we're putting it up at the site on the same page as this microsode. There'll be links to Ellen's writing and stuff in that same post. So if you enjoy this snippet, you should go listen to that.
I'm Ellen Starbuck, and I'm a writer, and I'm wearing odd socks. Yep, and I have issues, and I'm here with Andrew Price.
Well, only my mother calls me Andrew, so let's go with Andy from now on.
Okay, Andy Price.
Cool.
The first comic I ever read that made me realise I was in love with the medium was Squee by Jhonen Vasquez. He kind of has a penchant, is that a word? Penchant, is that a word? Poncho. Penchant?
Yeah.
He's got a poncho for kind of dark, weird cartoons. Yeah, so Squee is basically about a very unlucky child. And it's kind of, let's say, it's black comedy, and horrible things happen to him. Like, his parents really hate him, so they spend a lot of time telling him they wish he was dead. It's really dark. Very nice. It's really funny, though. Oh, he just has a series of really horrible things happen to him. He just unlucky things. He makes friends with a dog at one point, and he tells the dog to leave him alone because he's like, bad things happen if you're friends with me. And then the dog's kind of like, meh, meh, at the side of the road, and then the dog gets hit by a truck, and then it gets dragged along the road like 20 blocks, and it's horrible but really funny.
That is the definition of black comedy.
Yeah, I think that is. Cute little puppy dog, and because it's a cartoon, he's got massive eyes. Yeah, so that made me kind of realise that comics could be unrelentingly evil and dark and funny at the same time. Yes, that made me just kind of want to absorb more and more and more. So that broke my comic virginity. My comic hymen was broken by that.
So the last comic that surprised me
Yeah.
was Morning Glories. But I think the reason it surprised me was just because I hadn't seen storytelling done in that way in a comic book before. It had like this group of characters, and it would kind of tell a story. So they all go to this special high school. They're like teenage characters, go to special high school, lots of things going wrong, like they try to drown them in their first day, that kind of stuff.
But it was normal for me. I went to like a private all-girls school, and that was the ritual drowning. Like 28 girls died on my first day.
See, I went to like public school, so they just
what did they do?
Electrocuted you.
Just electrocute, right?
Yeah.
To see if you were what magical?
No, to just for pure sadistic purposes.
Yeah.
So they like leave characters alone for like a whole volume, like 6 issues or something, and it was just mental. And then very quickly I kind of just went, this is so much like Lost, because they kept doing the kind of the backstory, then having these mythical things, and then having this big roster of characters that they kept forgetting about and then going back to.
Yeah.
And I just never seen like a comic book that is such a homage to a TV show,
and so intricate,
and kind of, but is so far away from being plagiarism as well. It's like they've constructed a whole universe out of their stories and their characters, while still completely playing up to this certain style of storytelling. And I think I didn't realise comic books could work in that way.
Yeah.
What comic book do you think people talk about now?
Coachy Wannabe by Jamie Smart, who's an amazingly talented...
We own a book of his, right?
We do own several. He's an amazingly talented British comic book artist.
He did the Doctor Who's Where's Wally?
He did. He did Bear as well, which is really good. He's recently brought out this kind of free webcomic for kids called Moose Kids, which I think is doing really well. And it was one he published. It was like a web comic, basically, and he published it weekly. and he's released it as a graphic novel now, and the artwork is so beautiful. And it's just this very weird story about these kids in a school, and they have this kind of they have this like annual festival where everyone dresses up like bees, and it's about this little kid who's in love with this other kid, and it's like definitely worth reading, just like the artwork, and I mean beautiful, but it's like a really odd, sweet little story, and it's quite different to the bear stuff he did, which is kind of like this dark, it's like a bit like Squee, like Jhonen Vasquez. It's like this dark humour about this bear who gets basically tormented by this kind of rabbit type creature. But I don't think many people would have talked about it, because it's kind of like quite niche, but it's also because it was out there on the web first of all, but it's a really nice, like, for completists, it's a great thing to have. So I was going to say more people should talk about that or just read it, because he's great, and I think he's going to do some really interesting things with comics pretty soon. Like, he just seems like one of those people who's kind of embracing technology and how it works, and he just did it because he likes drawing. That's basically it. It's like he likes making things, and I think that's awesome. The comic book I go back to most, kind of, I'm comparing it to putting on like a really warm jumper when you're cold, or when when you're like, you're sad and you feel a bit rubbish and you want something comforting, so you want to watch like an old film or put on a comfy blanket, or that kind of thing. Have a mimosa for breakfast, that type of...
That's what you do when you're sad.
Yeah, I do, yeah. So the comic book I go back to most is... The comic book is Scott Pilgrim, just because it really reminds me of time when I read it. It's like a very beautiful love story, but in a really awful way. He's a bit of a dick at the beginning. Like, he's kind of awful and bratty, but it's also... He's very endearing as well, and all his friends are really funny, and it's in Toronto, and it's like, I'd been to Toronto a lot, so I recognise lots of the settings, and there's a lot of pop culture references as well. So it's one of those things you read and you go, hey, you're referencing something I've heard of. This makes me feel, I don't know, this makes me feel like I'm involved in the world. So I think it's just really comforting, because it is like super weirdly emo and funny, and every time you read it you spot a new joke you missed before. What is the most positive or unique thing about comics?
Most positive or unique thing about comics?
Yeah, Andy, if you could tell me in 3 words what the most positive or unique thing about comics is.
Stories. I like. No, the stories in comic books, I think that like to say, like, you get to do the visual and the words. It's a bit obvious, really. What I like is that you can go so many different places with it, especially when you're kind of releasing something month by month. Yeah, so that's it. It was 3 years long, I believe. I don't remember a time before we started talking. So thanks. I do. I still had a full glass of gin.
No. Bye.
We Have Issues is a weekly podcast full of reviews of comics and oversharing. We use grown-up language to make very childish jokes. You can find the show at wehaveissues.net, as well as anywhere else where average to not too bad podcasts can be found. Ellen and Andy are friends of comics, but are not affiliated with We Have Issues and cannot be held responsible for anything in that show.